Evelyn had always believed that marriage was a sacred bond, a promise two souls made before God and the world. But the moment her husband died from a harsh winter fever, her mother-in-law, Agatha Crowford, made it painfully clear that Evelyn was nothing more than a burden to be discarded. The town whispered that Evelyn was sterile, cursed with an empty womb, and Agatha fed those whispers like kindling to a fire, painting Evelyn as the reason her son had died without leaving an heir. Evelyn, quiet and soft-spoken, endured the humiliation with lowered eyes, but humiliation reached its peak on a bitter morning when Agatha arranged for her to be sold, though she sugar-coated it as reassignment to work as a maid for one of the local traders who sought cheap labor. Evelyn stood in the center of the courtyard, hands clasped, the cold wind lifting the hem of her simple grey dresses. Agatha announced to the gathered townsfolk that useless women should at least be useful somewhere else. Evelyn felt her cheeks burn with shame, but she kept her chin tucked in, refusing to cry. She had lost her husband, her home, and now her dignity, yet something deep inside her refused to break. As the trader came forward, leering in a way that made her stomach twist, the ground suddenly shook with the sound of hooves, and everyone turned as a tall, broad-shouldered figure rode into town on a dark stallion. It was Rowan Hale, the mountain man everyone desired, whispered about, admired from afar. He was known for living alone deep in the pines, a man of strength and silence, a man whose presence made even the boldest lower their gaze. With wild hair, a deep beard, and eyes like storm clouds, he dismounted with a slow, deliberate movement that made the entire courtyard fall still. Rowan's reputation was legendary. He traded pelts only once a season, spoke little, fought only when necessary, and never showed interest in any woman despite half the town throwing themselves at him. Yet now his gaze locked onto Evelyn with a focus so intense that she felt her breath catch. He walked up to Agatha, who puffed herself up with false pride, and Rowan's voice cut through the cold air like a blade. "She's not going with him." Agatha blinked, flustered. "This is none of your concern. Mr. Hale, she is my daughter-in-law no longer, and she is barren. I'm ridding my home of a wasted mouth." The words stabbed Evelyn harder than the winter wind. She expected Rowan to turn away, expected him to shrug and leave like everyone else did when it came to her fate. Instead, Rowan stepped forward, placing himself between her and the trader, as though shielding her from a predator. "If she's unwanted here," he said, voice rough, "I'll take her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Agatha clutched her chest dramatically, sputtering, "You want her? Her, she cannot give you children." Rowan didn't blink. "I didn't come for children," he said. "I came for her." Evelyn's heart thudded, shocked, confused, overwhelmed. The trader scowled and stepped back, while the townspeople murmured. Rowan reached out a hand to Evelyn, not grabbing, not commanding, but offering. Evelyn trembled, unsure whether she had the right to take it, unsure why he wanted her, unsure whether this was just another cruel twist of fate. But there was something in his eyes, a steadiness, a promise of safety she hadn't felt in years. Slowly she placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth of his calloused palm wrap around hers. Agatha shrieked dramatically as Rowan guided Evelyn toward his horse, lifting her gently up as though she weighed nothing. The crowd parted, some jealous, some stunned, some whispering about how the mountain man had just chosen the woman the whole town had rejected. As they rode away, Evelyn looked back one last time at the town that had spat her out like ashes. For the first time in months, she felt the smallest spark of hope flicker inside her chest. She didn't know why Rowan had chosen her or what awaited in the shadowy pine forests of his mountain home, but as his arm stayed steady around her waist, she thought maybe, just maybe, her story was no longer one of abandonment but of being found. And if you're loving how this story is unfolding, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next chapter. We're just getting started. The ride into the mountains was long, silent and cold, but not the suffocating kind of cold that came from being unwanted. This was a crisp, fresh cold, alive with pine and snow and the hum of distant rivers. Evelyn sat behind Rowan, her hands clutching his vest lightly, and with each mile she felt the weight of her past loosen. When they reached Rowan's cabin, nestled between cedar, trees and overlooking a valley painted gold by the setting sun, Evelyn's breath caught in wonder. The home was simple but beautiful in its ruggedness, built with strong hands and endless patience. Rowan dismounted, helped her down gently, and for the first time since they met, she dared to meet his eyes. Why did you take me?" she whispered. Rowan paused, as though choosing his words carefully, then said something that struck her deeper than any insult Agatha had ever hurled. "Because I've watched you for years, not in secret, not in desire, but in admiration. You cared for your husband without complaint. You fed Agatha when she was bedridden. You helped strangers without expecting a coin. You think your worth is tied to your womb, but I've seen your worth everywhere else." Evelyn stared at him, stunned into silence. No one had ever spoken to her like that. She wasn't sure whether to cry or run or thank him. But Rowan wasn't finished. "In these mountains," he said softly, "a woman's strength matters more than her ability to bear children. And you, Evelyn, are stronger than you. Think." She felt something break open inside her chest, a grief she had locked away for too long. Her knees buckled and she sank onto the porch step, tears finally spilling. She cried for her lost husband, for the home that had never loved her, for the whispers that had cut her, for the belief that she was worth nothing. Rowan didn't pull her or hush her. He simply sat beside her, offering his presence as a quiet shelter. When her tears finally eased, Rowan gently handed her a carved wooden cup of warm herbal tea. She wrapped her fingers around it, marveling at the warmth. "I don't know how to be anything but what they made me," she whispered. Rowan rested his elbows on his knees. "Then let the mountains unmake you and remake you." Days turned into weeks, and Evelyn slowly found pieces of herself she never knew existed. She helped Rowan gather firewood, learned to cook over open flame, wandered along the frost-kissed paths, and found peace in the quiet wilderness. Rowan never pushed her, never asked more than she could offer. He simply included her everywhere, in everything. The townspeople may have called her barren, but here in the mountains, Evelyn found herself blooming. One evening, while the fire cracked warmly in the hearth, Rowan stood beside her as she kneaded bread. "The town is holding its spring gathering," he said. "People will talk if we go together." Evelyn froze, unsure. "Talk about what?" Rowan met her gaze steadily. "That you're mine." The words sent a shock through her body, not possessive, not claiming, but protective, rooted in honor, not ownership. She swallowed. "And are you mine?" Rowan's slow, warm smile answered before his words did. "If you'll have me?" Her hands trembled, tears welling again, but this time they were warm, hopeful, overflowing with gratitude. "I will," she whispered. And so they went to the gathering. As they stepped into the town courtyard, whispers exploded. How beautiful Evelyn looked. How strong Rowan appeared beside her. How impossible it was to believe that the woman once discarded had become someone cherished, chosen, loved. Agatha stood at the edges, fuming, her face pale as Rowan took Evelyn's hand openly, proudly. Evelyn no longer bowed her head, no longer hid her eyes. She stood tall, shoulders back, beside the man who had seen her value long before she had seen it herself. And as Rowan squeezed her hand, she felt it fully. She was no longer the woman the town threw away. She was the woman the mountain man chose. If you felt the power of this journey, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life.